Hey, there's a political analyst. She brutally destroyed the EFF and the MK party. Hey, the things she was saying, she was not playing with them. She was waiting for that moment where she gets asked about MK party and President Jacob Zuma, and get asked about EFF and Julius Malema. When they asked her about that, she went in. And I want you guys to analyze what she had to say and tell me whether the things she's saying about MK party, whether the things she's saying about the EFF, is it fair for someone to say all of these things without mentioning any good thing as a political analyst on national TV, or she was just being biased? Is this woman biased or unbiased? You're gonna see her. Watch this.
The EFF, they are still very much in contention, although they did fail to win a single ward in Limpopo at that by-election. What does that say about the popularity of these two ANC splinters?
Well, I think, one mistake that people make is to think that the people of Limpopo are going to support Julius Malema because he comes from there. And this is a big mistake, because if you understand Julius Malema's history, you will know that there's a bridge in Limpopo that stood for maybe about 5 or more years because his company On Point hadn't actually done its job. And so the most negatively affected people by Julius Malema's alleged corruption while he was still a member of the ANC was most felt by the people of Limpopo. So they are not going to support him. And that is why he doesn't get widespread, support within his own home province, because people have experienced the worst of him, unfortunately. And I think, while Julius Malema has managed to have a 10-year run under the EFF and really did challenge the ways in which the dominant political parties were engaging in politics, particularly the politics of blackness and the politics of racism and how it manifests itself in a post-1994 era, he has not, unfortunately, been able to move beyond the issues that he kind of started with. And I fear that he may not be able to go further, considering that the Floyd Shivambus and other people who were quite heavily influential in terms of policy making in the EFF are no longer there. And already we see Julius Malema himself is somebody who's very difficult to kind of deal with and convince otherwise if he's not convinced about something. And so these are strong leaders that have left who had the potential to challenge him. And so the question is going to be now, who is going to be left in the party that can challenge him, and that isn't basically in a way hero worshipping him as somebody who started this party. And then in terms of the MK, for me, it's really interesting how they really rely on South Africans' short-term memory in order to be able to get their wins. Because to me, it doesn't make sense how a man who was the president of this country, not just an ordinary member of society, but this man, Jacob Zuma, has been a member of cabinet in South Africa since post-1994. He has never been an ordinary citizen of South Africa. And he even went as far as the highest office, being the president of the biggest political party at the time in South Africa, the African National Congress. And he somehow is convincing people that there are things that he couldn't do as president that he suddenly is going to be able to do as kind of an influencer in a much smaller party with a much kind of higher hurdle of an influence. And so it's very interesting also to see how that political party, the MK, has become the army or the band of the alleged corrupting forces. And these are the people who we have, from state capture accusation after accusation of their involvement, of their taking money from the literal state fiscus. And now these are the people who are pushing and working very hard to come back into power, so that as far as I'm concerned, they can do what they did the last time, because they got away with it and they have never been held under any kind of accountability for their actions. And I think in particular, July 2021 and the riots and the chaos that happened in KZN is one of the things that I think, Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC really failed us as a country on, because they should have been held accountable. And a lot of the people who are now members of the MK, who are now organizers of the MK, and who are now in the leadership of the MK, are people who are alleged to be part of that riot. And so for as long as you have people who behave, who are allowed to be above the law, who behave and who are allowed to be reckless and do as they wish without any consequences, we are going to struggle to develop the kind of country that we want. And unfortunately, we're at a critical time as a country, because it's been 30 years and it's been 30 years of ANC rule. And so we are entering that period now where, the apartheid seems for a lot of people to be very much in the past. And you've got people who are 30 years old who didn't live in apartheid. And so it is increasingly becoming a situation where a large chunk, the youth of your population, of your voting population, has no idea of apartheid, and so isn't moved necessarily by conversations around needing to undo the legacy of apartheid, and is more concerned about the present and the future. And the ANC has continuously been unable at this point, looking at their 40% win, they haven't been able to convince that. Julius Malema, to an extent, has been able to convince them, but I don't know if he necessarily will be able to continue to convince them, or if those people won't simply move over to the MK, or maybe even surprise us and move over to the SACP. So I think what's concerning me is that we are about to see a multitude of many small parties within our political system. And while the ANC deserves critique and deserves everything that's coming to it, it did provide us to an extent with some level of stability. And I'm not sure how much stability we're going to be able to have when we have this multitudity of political parties all vying for power. Already the last election, we're looking at 70 plus political parties that actually vied for it. In the coming election, both at a local government and national, you're likely to see even more people going for that power. And so it's going to be more and more difficult for South Africans to discern who is the best candidate for them, but also for them to be able to understand who is actually in power and how are they moving. If you look at a place like Nigeria, for instance, they even stopped kind of really using names and they just use a number, because there are so many political parties. And that is the opposite, I think, of where we want to go, because although it provides for a diversity of opinions, there is a point at which you lose the stability that's required in the political system, and you lose the coherence that is required for a government to be able to run and decisions to be able to make, as we've seen in municipalities where coalitions are chopping and changing every 6 months.
Asanda Ngwasheng, thank you very much for that analysis.
So you saw her, right? She was going in. She wasn't playing. She was waiting for the moment where they ask her. Ati Julius Malema ambamba so. Ati Julius Malema Limpopo, they don't like him. Ati boo, Shanghai Cape Churi. Ati Jacob Zuma was a president. How come he wants to? Political analyst. They will dribble your leaders. They don't play. Yes. Nizwele. Is it fair? Is it biased? Is it unbiased? Up to you. Thank you very much.